Alright guys, welcome back to Urge. Jameson, Alex here, bringing the next video in the Subclass series today. We're going to be talking about the unofficial, official subclasses from Critical Role that are featured on D&D Beyond. So they are technically homebrew,
right?
But they are featured on here. It says that it's unofficial content. I'm thinking that maybe in the future these will become real, as they are pretty relevant on here. I'm guessing there's probably going to be a second Teldore campaign guide, or a second Wildmount campaign, or future campaign 3 guide whenever they start the Critical Role campaign 3. I imagine with it being as popular as it is, that they probably will make some changes to these at some point. All that being said, this is the Gunslinger Fighter that we're going to be talking about today, guys. If you're new to the channel, to the Subclass series, what we're going to do is we're going to go through all the abilities gained in the subclass. We're going to rate it based on its roleplay value, combat value, and overall class synergy, based on how the abilities gained in this subclass improve on the base class abilities.
Right.
We're also doing a giveaway, so make sure you like, comment, and subscribe down below to be entered in that for the D&D Beyond Players Bundle.
4 books.
Yes, cool stuff on there. So, without any further ado, Alex, take it away.
Boom. So, this is a very interesting subclass, and you get something that normally isn't in 5th edition, and it's called Firearm Proficiency.
Yes.
It's a very specific thing to this, and you gain proficiency with firearms, allowing you to add proficiency bonus to attacks made with firearms. If you had a firearm-based subclass and you didn't get proficiency with firearms, there'd be a problem.
Yes, to say the least.
So part of that, there's a bunch of stuff that goes with this whole firearm proficiency you get at level 3 when you choose this archetype or subclass. You have Gunsmith, which gains you proficiency in Tinker's tools. May use them to craft ammunition at half the cost, repair damaged firearms, or even draft and create new ones at your DM's discretion. Some extremely experimental and intricate firearms are only available through crafting. There are 2 specifically that the book lists that are only available through crafting yourself.
Yes.
Firearm properties. Firearms are a new and volatile technology, and as such bring their own unique set of weapon properties. Some properties are followed by a number, and this signifies an element of that property outlined below. These properties replace the optional ones presented in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Firearms are ranged weapons.
Very important.
Of course they are. They have a reload feature. The weapon can be fired a number of times equal to its reload score before you must spend 1 attack or 1 action to reload. You must have 1 free hand to reload a firearm, so you can't be out there dual pistoling
like crazy. Yeah. You have to stole one and then reload and then pull it back out, kind of thing.
They also have a misfire. Whenever you roll an attack roll with a firearm and the dice roll is equal to or lower than the weapon's misfire score, the weapon misfires. The attack misses and the weapon cannot be used again until you spend an action to try and repair it. To repair your firearm, you must make a successful Tinker Tools check, which is a DC equal of 8 plus the misfire score. If your check fails, weapon is broken and must be mended out of combat at the quarter of the cost of the firearm itself, and it lists that in a table below, like how much ammo costs, cost of the gun, damage, weight, range, properties, all that stuff is in the table below, which we'll put up on screen here in a second. Also, creatures who use a firearm without being proficient increase the weapon's misfire by a score of 1.
Yes.
Which isn't really a huge penalty, besides also not getting an extra proficiency bonus is a much bigger penalty than the extra misfire.
Right.
Also, you have Explosive. Upon hit, everything within 5 foot of the target must make a dexterity saving throw equal to DC of 8 plus proficiency plus your dexterity modifier, or suffer 1d8 fire damage. If the weapon misses, the ammunition fails to detonate, or it bounces away harmlessly before doing so.
Yeah, and with that one, there's only 1 weapon on the table that actually has that trait, so that's only specific if you go ahead and craft that special weapon.
Yeah, so that's not something that all the firearms do all the time.
Right.
And finally, we have the ammunition itself. All firearms require ammunition to make an attack, and due to their rare nature, ammunition may be near impossible to find or purchase. However, if the materials are gathered, you can craft ammunition yourself by using your Tinker Tools at half the cost. Each firearm uses its own unique ammunition and is generally sold or crafted in batches listed below next to the price. So for reference, here is that firearms table, just so you can see it. Shows the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different weapons. 2 of, again, if you look at the bottom 2, they are crafted specific. There's different damage types. You see that there's some are light, some have a different misfire score. The highest misfire score is still a natural 3. So at the worst of any of these guns, 15% chance to misfire.
Right.
The range is listed on there. Short and long range, as opposed like with regular bows and other ranged weapons would have.
Yes.
Nothing else. The rest of those really function like regular ranged weapons. It's just
Right.
really the reload and misfire score and the explosive bit's different.
Yeah, the only little comment I want to make on this here is a direct comparison to some of the ranged weapons.
Sure.
Like, comparably to like a longbow, for example, you're gonna have like the 1d8 damage as well. The range is going to be similar for most of these. Well, the longer range ones are going to be similar, I should say. The shorter range ones, obviously, shorter. But the biggest thing on here is the reload factor. So even though the damage die is bigger, over time the average damage is probably going to be very comparable to a bow, just because you're having to take one of your attacks or bonus action or something to reload.
Yep.
So that's something to keep in mind as well. So if you're thinking, wow, like 2d8 piercing or 2d12 or 1d12, you're like, man,
at range.
At range? Like, wow, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But you have to factor into as well that there's going to be reloading, so they're not going to get as many attacks as if someone had a great axe or a great sword in melee.
Yeah.
So they're going to, over time, it's probably going to be very comparable damage.
Right. Absolutely.
And then at level 3 also we have Adept Marksman. You learn powerful trick shots to disable or damage opponents using your firearms. And with this, you get a few different things on here. And we will go over all the trick shots here in a second. But there are 2 trick shots that you learn at level 3, which are detailed down below. We'll get to that in just a minute. Many of these maneuvers enhance your attack in some way. Each trick shot must be declared before the attack roll is made.
That's important.
Very important. You can't hit confirm or crit confirm. You have to take the risk.
Most importantly, you can't crit confirm.
Yes, you have to take the risk ahead of time before knowing the outcome. And you can only use 1 trick shot per attack. So something to keep in mind as well. You learn additional trick shots at level 7, 10, 15, and 18. Each time you learn a new trick shot, you can also replace one trick shot with a different one. And then also, going along with the trick shots, you gain a feature called Grit. You gain a number of Grit points equal to your Wisdom modifier. Regain 1 expended Grit point each time you roll a 20, so a critical hit, on a d20 roll for an attack with a firearm, or deal a killing blow with a firearm to a creature of a significant threat at the DM's discretion. You regain all expended Grit points after a short or long rest. So something in mind there with the DM discretion. Significant threat is very much up to debate.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting ways that I honestly just thought of maybe a fun way to do is maybe you do maybe it's a DC of 20 minus the creature's CR.
Yeah, you could. There's a couple different ways you could definitely run it.
That's interesting.
And the thing is, too, you have to have the actual killing blow. So it's probably not going to have. Even if you gave it every time you got a killing blow, probably it's not going to be too crazy.
Right.
So
it can be because if they can one shot something every time there shoots like a bunch of little bitty stuff, you're probably not really rewarding those.
Exactly.
But outside of that, I mean, in combat, you're very rarely fighting more than 3 or 4 things at once.
Yeah, depending on.
So the likelihood of them getting the killing blow on more than one of those is highly unlikely.
Right.
If you're in a party that's got more than 2 people, anyway.
Yeah, up to discretion for sure.
Yeah.
Some gray area there. And then saving throws for some of these different options. The saving throw is going to be 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your dexterity modifier. So actually going into the trick shots, there are 8 different options that you get. First is the bullying shot. You use this powerful blast to shake the resolve of a creature. You can expend 1 grit point while making an intimidation check to gain advantage on the roll. When we first looked at this, we were confused because there is another one that gives advantage on the attack roll. This is to give advantage on the intimidation check. The way it's worded is just a little strange on here. So it's more of an RP kind of thing. Next option is a dazing shot. When you make a firearm attack against a creature, expend a grit point to try to dizzy your opponent. On a hit, creature suffers normal damage and makes a con save to suffer disadvantage on attacks until the end of their next turn. So nice little utility on there.
Yep. Next up, we've got Deadshot, as Jameson just mentioned a while ago. The most straightforward one. You spend 1 grit point to gain advantage on an attack roll. Boom.
There you go.
Best way to avoid those misfires. It's just having advantage on the attack roll. Next up is the Disarming Shot. On a hit, the creature suffers normal damage and must succeed on a strength saving throw or drop 1 held item of your choice. And you can have the object be pushed 10 feet away from you. So you can actually knock it out of their hand and knock it away from them. So if they got a shield, knock the shield out of their hand, lower their AC. If they've got a really powerful weapon of sorts, like a big magic sword or something, you can knock that out of their hand, and maybe somebody else in your party is going after you to kind of run by and pick it up.
Yep.
Now all they can do is punch and kick you.
Yeah. Definitely very good on the utility side there.
Yep.
Then we have a Forceful Shot. When you make a firearm attack against the creature, expend a grit point to try to trip them up and force them back. On a hit, creature suffers normal damage and must succeed a strength saving throw or be pushed back 15 feet from you. And then we have Piercing Shot. When you make a firearm attack, expend a grit point to fire through multiple opponents. The initial attack gains a +1 to the firearm's misfire score. On a hit, the creature suffers normal damage, and you make an attack roll with disadvantage against every creature in a line directly behind the target within your first range increment. Only initial attack can misfire. So you're just basically, it's a piercing shot, just like it says. You shoot through a target, but once it goes through the first target, you have to reroll to see if it hits the ones behind it. So, it is what it is.
Makes sense. The last two, we have Violent Shot. When you make a firearm attack against a creature, you can expend 1 or more grit points to enhance the volatility of the attack. For each grit point expended, the attack gains a +2 to the firearm's misfire score. Think, oh, that's a bad thing. Well, there's a reason for that. If the attack hits, you roll 1 additional weapon damage die per grit point spent when determining the damage. So if you spend 1 grit point instead of 1d10, it's 2d10. So basically making it a crit.
Essentially, yeah.
Essentially.
Minus you're just doubling the damage if you use the 1.
But there is a higher risk of misfire. So you can drop a bunch of points to try to annihilate something all at once, but keep in mind you're spending it ahead of time.
Right.
So if you miss,
you're out your grit points and you could misfire and cause issues.
Correct.
And stuff, yeah.
And finally, we have Winging Shot, and this is make a firearm attack against a creature. You spend 1 grit point to attempt to topple a moving target. On a hit, the creature suffers normal damage, but must make a strength saving throw or be knocked prone.
Yeah, definitely very good for flying creatures because you can try to knock them out of the air, which is
or if you're chasing
very
somebody.
useful. Yes, for sure.
At a distance as well. And if you did the one final note on this section before we go through the rest of the abilities, if you were doing math with us earlier, you noticed you got up to a total of 6 choices of these trick shots you could pick, but there are 8.
Yes.
So even if you go all the way to the end, you will have to forego 2 of these options.
Right.
So there is some choice there and some sacrifice, which is very common in a lot of subclasses. You don't get every single ability choice there. But plenty of choices to pick from. There's some utilities, some extra damage.
Yes. Definitely pretty solid.
Plenty of options.
Then at level 7, we have Quick Draw. You get to add your proficiency bonus to your initiative, and then you can also stow a firearm and then draw another firearm as a single object interaction on your turn. Now, depending on your games, this could be very important or very not. Some people are much more sticklers on the action economy with the free interactions.
Right.
So that's something to really keep in mind on there. So if you are doing that, this is definitely going to be very helpful to be able to draw and put away because you have to have free hands to reload and stuff. So definitely good to have.
Indeed.
Then at level 10, we have Rapid Repair. You learn to quickly attempt to fix a jammed gun. You can spend a grit point to attempt to repair a misfired firearm as a bonus action. So that way, being a fighter, you can not forgo an attack.
Yes.
Use a bonus action instead. At level 15, we have the ability to reload your firearm as a bonus action. So you can fix it as a bonus action at 10, and you can reload it as a bonus action at 15. So nice ways to keep your firing going.
Yes,
constant.
all the time. And finally, with the last 2 abilities, they both pop at level 18. At level 18, your firearm attacks score a critical hit on a roll of a 19 or a 20. And you regain a grit point on a roll of a 19 or a 20. So just like with the base form, it just says 20. It lets that carry over to you have a 10% crit chance and also a 10% grit chance.
Yes.
How about that? Also,
crit it.
Yeah, you can crit it and grit it. Also at level 18 and with your extra critical hit chance, they buff it as well with hemorrhaging critical. Upon reaching 18th level, whenever you score a critical hit with an attack with a firearm, it does specify that, the target suffers half of the damage of the attack at the end of its next turn. So essentially applying like a burn effect.
Yeah. A bleed. Hemorrhaging critical.
Yeah, well done. Well done.
Yeah, I just read the book.
So. so not only are you getting a double crit chance compared to most everybody else, like we said, almost everybody else, your crits are actually going to do extra damage because you get the crit damage plus an extra 50% on top of that as a bleed effect on their next turn. Yeah,
so you're dealing a solid amount of damage when you hit your criticals, and you have a pretty decent chance, especially being a fighter, getting as many attacks as you do.
Yes,
it's going to be happening relatively regularly,
more than most anybody else.
Yes. So those are all the abilities gained in the subclass. So now I'll move on to the rating portion of the video. And before we go into the roleplay value, which is my specialty, we have the asterisk, as always.
Here we go.
When talking about the roleplay value, we're talking about interacting with the world around you, interacting with NPCs, non-combat scenarios, avoiding combat, basically things outside of the initiative order.
Right.
Not talking about your class fantasy, history, lore, background. That's on you as a player. Can't rate you as a player, but we can rate the abilities gained in the subclass and how they might improve your potential in those roleplay scenarios.
Yeah.
So, that being clarified, looking at all of these abilities, the actual roleplay bonuses that you're going to get by playing the subclass versus a different subclass are not really that in-depth. The only thing really that you're getting is your proficiency with Tinker's tools.
Yep.
You have the ability to craft these special weapons, which could come into play potentially in RP. That's though very niche use on there. And then the only other thing is if you choose to get the bullying shot for the intimidation checks.
Yep.
Or you could, another niche thing on here, like a disarming shot or maybe a winging shot to knock something prone or knock something out of someone's hand could potentially be used in the RP setting, though. If you're using it on a regular NPC, you could kill the NPC because you're dealing damage to them as well. So, and that's if you choose them, because there's going to be 2 that you don't get.
Right.
So you have to choose them, and then they're niche on top of that. So not a whole lot in the RP department. So we went with just a simple 2 out of 5 flumps for the RP on this one.
On to the combat side of things, and as we always say, if one is light in one category, it usually is more focused on the other, and that is definitely the case here. When you have an entire subclass based around firearm weapons, well, it's not really going to be designed to do a lot of social interactions, is it?
Right.
You're designed for shooting things and lots of things. So you look again. You're starting off with this whole concept of firearms, and normally in a 5th edition setting, wow,
Got there.
This firearms aren't exactly a common thing. It specifies in here multiple times how ammunition may be hard to find, but you can find the materials and make the stuff yourself. You're gonna have to repair these guns yourself. A lot of times, and there's even 2 of the weapons you can't get unless you craft them yourself on the table. So there's a lot of uniqueness there that brings a lot of interesting flavor. And then you can talk about the actual mechanics, the reload mechanic, the misfire mechanic, the explosive mechanic for the one gun. Damage compares a lot to bows, but like James had talked about earlier, over the course of time, it's going to measure out a lot.
Yep.
And if any base class could pull this off, it's definitely fighter, because you've got more attacks than anybody else has, so you having to spend one of your attacks to reload or a bonus action to reload at a later time if you're not want to use your bonus action for something else, which is also an interesting thing here with the fighter is you've got 4 attacks, so if you have something else you want to use your bonus action for, you can forego an attack to reload, and you can still shoot 3 times while you got your bonus action for some other effect that you want to do. So that's got some cost in there that's not great, whereas if this is a ranger, for example, having to reload a firearm every other shot, they've only got 2 attacks, so it's much more of a cost and a sacrifice than they have to reload. You've got multiple different trick shots that have both utility in combat for knocking people prone, giving you advantage, giving targets disadvantage, knocking their weapon out of their hand, pushing people away. So there's plenty of utility around the combat besides just raw damage output to give it some nice flavor and some complexity. So it's not just point and shoot all the time, but it's not crazy. You're not getting a lot of AOE combat here. Probably it's still lacking thing. There is the piercing shot, but
it's pretty. That's probably the one that I would definitely not take, just because not only do you hit something, they have to be in a line, and you have disadvantage on the next target. So it's kind of like,
Outside of that, you're just getting buffs to how fast you can reload, how fast you can, fix a misfired gun with using your bonus action. Bonus to your initiative, so letting you go first, maybe pop somebody for a good chunk of damage. Clerics that have Total Dead will appreciate that. And then an increased chance for crits is never a bad thing. And then obviously increased chance to get more grit, so you can do your trick shots more often. And in fact, your crits can do extra damage. It's a lot of simple stuff. Outside, the most complex thing here is just the whole base idea of how the firearm mechanics work. Outside of that, a lot of it's pretty straightforward once you wrap your hand around the whole reload and misfire bit. That's going to be a main part of how you operate. Outside of that, pretty straightforward, and a solid 4
Yes.
out of a possible 5 flumps. And I think the only reason why it isn't higher is you are going to have to sacrifice from time to time to get reload. You do have that chance of misfiring, and there's no other weapon in the game that has a chance of just breaking.
Right.
And the point that Jameson made the most, when we were talking earlier, was that there's no other subclass in the game where your entire subclass can just fall apart because you rolled a natural 1.
Right. Because literally, say you only have one firearm, all of these trick shots and everything are tied to your firearm.
Specifically.
If you fail your repair on the trick on the gun, then your gun is broken, and you say you don't have another one, then all of your abilities, you have nothing. Like, you are just shooting. If you have another bow or something, I mean, you could pull that out, but you can't use any of your grip points, you can't use any of your trick shots with that.
Yep.
So
you're just a ranged fighter of just basic.
Now, is that going to happen very much? No, probably not, if ever. But there is that chance that it could happen.
Yep.
And again, too, over time, the damage should average out relatively close when you're having to give up attacks. Because if you just played like a champion fighter, just straight up super simple champion fighter with archery instead of a melee build, you'd probably be doing more damage on average. Maybe once you hit 18 in the subclass, once you have the hemorrhaging critical, that's when it would really start to pump. But that's really late on, and you might not ever get to that in your campaign. So it's definitely on the higher end here, where the capstone is great, but it's so late that you get that kind of damage output that it's comparable to many other subclasses before that.
For sure.
So hence the 4. Then lastly, we have the overall class synergy, and with the fighters, the main things with the subclass, obviously you have your extra attacks, you have your action surge, which pretty much is good for everything.
Every base class would love to have that thing called action surge.
And you have like second wind, you're indomitable, those things like that, which not many subclasses actually synergize with
directly.
Very, very rare for those on the fighter side of things. So the main things we're looking at here is the extra attacks and like your fighting style, which of course does go pretty well with this. With the extra attacks being able to be foregoed to reload is really cool. It gives you another way to reload something versus, having to. Like Alex said, it works better for a fighter
than with anybody else, for sure.
And then, of course, archery fighting style really goes well because archery is called archery, but it says ranged weapons. You get +2. So, and it says that the firearms are ranged weapons, which is important for that fighting style.
Specifically.
So because of the extra attacks and the ability to use the extra attacks for alternate purposes, which is cool, and the archery fighting style, we gave it a solid 4. Though it is simple synergy, it is very impactful, I would say.
And it does give a little bit of internal synergy as you level up, while instead of having to spend a whole attack to try to repair, you can use your bonus action. You can reload as a bonus action later on, so there's some kind of growing synergy within where it buffs your own abilities, so lets you be better at it as you go, which kind of makes sense. I like when subclasses don't just give new abilities, but buff abilities you already have as you go. It feels like you're actually getting better at your craft as your character gets further down into a subclass.
The only other last thing I want to kind of mention is with the ammo, depending on how strict DM and stuff is, with it not only keeping track of ammo, because obviously if you're ranged, you're going to have bow and arrow, so you have to keep track of your arrows versus your ammunition. But if it's rare, you have to craft it, and it's more expensive. So if gold is rare commodity, you're going to have an interesting time. If materials are rare commodity, you're going to have an interesting time. So that's another thing to keep in mind as well.
I would definitely have a discussion with your DM before a campaign. Especially, a one-shot may be a big deal. If you're going to try to play this in a campaign, I would definitely discuss with your DM and what they're planning in terms of setting. Like I said, how rare materials are, what kind of setting you're doing.
And in that vein of things, you definitely have to make sure that there's a black powder merchant as well. So, little thing there for you. Black powder. Anyways.
Learn from my mistakes.
Anyways, so something to keep in mind as well. That's going to wrap it up for today, guys. Keep it nice and short and sweet, relatively. So we're going to continue to go through the D&D Beyond subclasses that are on for the Critical Role stuff.
There's 2 more before the Blood Hunter.
Before Blood Hunter, and that's a whole big old thing on and of itself, so stay tuned for all of those. And we're going to continue to do homebrew reviews and stuff like that as well for subclasses.
So let us know.
We are doing tier list reviews as well for RP and for combat, so we're working on all of those. Stay tuned to the channel for those. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to like, subscribe, hit the bell notifications so you know when all of our new videos are coming out. And as always, guys, thanks for watching.